not, then that's fine too. So
Yeah, we're going. I just started the recording here, so
all right, well, hey, I'm on your time. We can jump in or parse
yeah,
this out as you wish.
yeah. I mean, so thank you, Ryan, as always, for being here. Market's changing. This is our. When did we do the last one? 2 weeks ago, and
Seems like it. Yeah.
it's funny the difference a day makes, um, and what a difference a couple weeks makes. So, I've been following your blog. I'm sure most people here have, but I think it's really important for you to share some of those stats that you had with the world. So I don't have anything. Let's allow you to do your presentation, Ryan, and then I've got a couple questions, and I'm sure other people do as well, and we can do a Q&A at the end of this. So again, for you guys just joining us, we can't see Ryan's pretty face right now, but we will see his presentation. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody during his presentation. If you do have some questions, go ahead and feel free to type them in the chat bar, and we can kind of track things that way, or just wait until the end and we'll do a Q&A. So that said, Ryan, jump into it. You can share your
Oh,
screen.
boom, and here we are.
Yes. Woo!
When in doubt, unplug your USB for the camera.
All
Woo,
right.
okay, so sorry to cut you off there.
No sweat. It's yours. The floor is yours.
Great. So what I was thinking that we could do is maybe I can talk for about 10 minutes. I want to share my screen, go through some fresh stats I just pulled yesterday, and walk through trends and maybe kind of set the pace for this conversation. But my observation with doing a lot of Zoom meetings now is that sometimes when it comes to Q&A, people don't ask questions. It's sort of like when you're in class and thinking, I don't want to raise my hand in front of everybody. And so what I want you to do as we're thinking about where we want this to go is, what do you want to get out of this time? We have an hour set aside. I mean, I can stay for longer if need be, but think about your questions. You can put them in the chat, but try to bring something to the table. So, but let me share my screen and then we'll jump in and go from there. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yay, okay, good. Then let me maximize that, my PowerPoint. Okay. Well, let's talk about pandemic market trends. It's been an interesting ride over these past few weeks, and I hope that this will provide some perspective and maybe some hands-on stats. I'm going to give you a link where you can download all the visuals that I'm going to share today. But first and foremost, I want to share, just as I did on my blog today, I have this shabby chic thing that I made hanging up on my office wall. It says, "The market is always moving." And I think it can impress Chip and Joe from HGTV, but most of all, I think that it's a reminder that things are, never the same in real estate. And so sometimes in real estate, the danger is when our narrative remains the same and we're constantly saying the same exact thing about the market. That's good, but then the market changes and we have to, I think, begin thinking and considering how can I begin to talk about the market in a different way, okay? And so I want to parse from the beginning that there's a difference though between having a positive mindset and market conditions, okay? I've had a little bit of flack lately from just a few people saying, Ryan, stop being so negative, and sharing all this negative information. And I just say, I'm actually sharing facts. It's not positive or negative. These are literally market facts. And I think that the facts can empower us to make real estate decisions, to help our clients make decisions, and to understand what the market's doing, all right? So being positive in life has literally nothing to do with being real about market conditions. So anyway, let's jump in. Here are the latest stats. I got a lot of positive reception to this chart the other day. I hope that you guys like this. One thing that, let's see here. And am I still on? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got this weird notification from Zoom. So anyway, okay, so you can see change by week. And what we want to do is be watching the market week by week and even sometimes day by day just to understand, well, how are things developing? And so here's new listings, and you can see that clearly there's been less new listings. Okay, but this past week, we saw more listings than the previous week. And I think right now, it looks like we might be on target this week to actually see more than the previous week too. So we'll see what happens. But I think this is so important because then you can let people know that, hey, stuff is coming to the market. It's definitely lower than it was before. Similar trend with pendings. Pendings have clearly been down. And so that positive narrative that, hey, everything is fine. And I'm not saying that things aren't fine, but just things are so different. Okay, and so here's cancellations and holds. I'm going to share all this visually in just a sec, but this chart will be coming out at least once a week, maybe more. Um, but here's a look at listings in the region week by week. You can see that these are daily listings, and there's this very cyclical vibe where almost every week you can see the peak of listings happens on Thursday or Friday. And so right now, like I said, I think this week we might go beyond last week, but you can see very clearly over the past few weeks, we've seen less new listings hit the market. We're down 20% from where we were just a few weeks ago. Okay, but then this is a great stat to share with clients that here are the number of listings that have been hitting the market. And so to, I think, combat that narrative that the market is completely dry, it's a desert, I would say no, there's no such thing as we're at zero. That's certainly not true. Here's a great way to look at it though, because we want to ask, okay, I see what's happening over the past few weeks, but where are we in relation to last year? Now, a graph like this, you'll either love it, you'll think, oh my gosh, let's get to the next slide. This is just too squiggly. But basically in red, you see new listings in 2020. This is the graph I just showed you. And then, but in gray, you see new listings from 2019, where you can see clearly that there's a 37% difference between last year during the same week last time. And so that's what we want to keep in track. And so we're really down quite a bit. A lot of places around the country are experiencing a dive in listings. We've seen a dive in listings in many countries around the world too. And so this is not a phenomenon that's foreign to what's happening in the rest of the country or even the world. But astoundingly, 517 properties on hold since March 12th. You can see a massive peak around the 12th, especially the 15th, 16th. And then we've seen sort of less people taking their homes off the market lately. Similar thing with canceled, huge spike. And then sort of a little bit less lately, but there's still properties being canceled. Here's an astounding stat, 954 total cancels and holds since March 12th. And that's just absolutely incredible for this time of year. Okay, we do see more canceled listings around, Thanksgiving and such. It makes sense. People take their homes off the market. They're like, I'm just going to list in the spring. But to have that now is just absolutely incredible. So one thing to consider though, is that what's going to happen with all these properties that have canceled and gone on hold. I've been hearing some echoes of sellers seeing the market and going, hey, I want to sort of beat everyone else to the market, because if all these properties sort of rush when the pandemic's over, then I want to be there before, and before, this huge amount of inventory hits. Now, there's no guarantee that this would all hit at once, but we might see a little bit of a rush in inventory. And the real question becomes, what will demand be like? Okay, so a lot of people are thinking, hey, demand is huge. There's going to be all this pent-up demand. And so will pent-up demand meet, inventory levels? And that's to be determined. Here's pendings. And you can see pendings, a similar trend, down about 44% from where we were a few weeks back. And that's a really huge stat. It's very indicative. It's not negative. This is real. Okay, and so we've seen about half of what we would normally see in the market. And in a few months, when all these pendings start closing, we'll have some pretty dismal sales volume. Here's a different way to look at it. 332 pendings over the last week compared to 612 a few weeks ago. All right, and so it's been a very noticeable difference. Now, someone told me this week, they said, hey, but the fact is that there were 332 last week, and I don't dispute that. It's a fact, but this fact makes the most sense in the context of what we're seeing. When we isolate facts, sometimes it's a way of us trying to cherry pick information to maybe spin a narrative, okay? Here's something interesting to watch. I have a few more slides here. Last month, we saw the median price increase by 15,000 in the region. Okay, and one of the things that's important that I've been saying, I talked about this last week on my blog, was that we got to really understand that March sales don't actually tell us about the market in March. Okay, if you didn't know, 83% of all sales that closed last month got into contract February or before, and so literally 8.3 out of every 10 sales got into contract before this month. But here's the kicker. So if we're considering pandemic data, and we look at March 12th and beyond, only 2.9% of sales in March got into contract on the 12th, and then closed in March. So 97% of sales last month tell us nothing about the market during the pandemic. And so let's be careful about how we use these stats, because this hot market reflects January and February instead of now. Does that make sense? I hope so. Here's a great stat though. 54% of March sales had multiple offers. Okay, so, and that's really reflects how strong the market was. Remember in February, and mortgage rates going down to 3%. I mean, it was like a steroid in the market, and so it makes sense to see a really strong stat like that. I suspect in coming time the stat will be lower, because you can see that 43% of pendings since the lockdown, since March 20th, have multiple offers. Okay, so there's a couple takeaways here. Number one, the market is moving. It's possible to have a market where you could have multiple offers. I've definitely been seeing Facebook posts about, hey, I put this property on the market, we had 5 offers right away. That type of dynamic is definitely happening. But let's realize is that what we're seeing in pendings right now is clearly different from what we saw before. And so demand has lessened, and we're poised to see a market that is more subdued, even though we have a market that is going to be more aggressive in some price ranges, especially at the entry-level price point in neighborhoods, okay? And so let's be careful about the doom and gloom thoughts of saying that this market's tanking, it's imploding, because that might conflict with what you actually see in a neighborhood when you list a property, okay? Let's not act like demand is nowhere. A couple quick thoughts. Short sales, here's sort of the trend since, years ago. Short sales were 0.26% of all sales in Sacramento County in 2020 in the first quarter. So, I mean, these hardly exist. There's hardly anything out there. Similar dynamic with REOs, 1.3% of sales over this past quarter. And so technically last year to this year, we have had more REOs, but even in the region, 1.4% REOs in 2019 compared to 1.1% in 2018. So a lot of people are saying, well, these are going to, increase massively. The LA Times had their article, and we're going to see, people, going into foreclosure. And, if we have a lot of defaults, then that could very well increase. First, I'll say that we're at the bottom with distressed inventory. There's literally really no place to go but up. So in a normal market, it could make sense just to see this change anyway. But I just want to remind us that, especially for people salivating over, potential deals and, distressed properties, that it would take a while for these properties to enter the market and to actually go through the foreclosure process. And think about short sales. We've had 8 years of equity growth. And so if people are going to sell from a distressed situation, they might not really be doing a short sale anyway because they have equity, unless I think FHA buyers, people putting 3% down, they're in an instant negative equity position as soon as the property closes, because they can't go relist the property tomorrow and then even handle the real estate sales. And so I think that, borrowers who have used financing with very little down are more, prone to risk in this regard. There's a couple more slides. Redfin put this out and shows that a decline in the list price throughout the United States for the markets they cover. I think that's one thing that we want to watch in our market. I started to make a really pretty graph like this the other night, and I had about 2 to 3 hours of work into it. It was looking awesome, and then I woke up the next day and it was missing from my desktop. So like a dope, I probably just didn't save it. I can't believe it, but it's really, really tedious to extract this type of information. I'm on it. I'll get something like this soon for everyone, fingers crossed. But we really want to look to the listings to help us understand the market. In a neighborhood, when you pull comps, what is actually moving right now? Okay, what is getting into contract? Those are the questions to ask, rather than what was super hot that closed in March. Okay, because we just really want to gauge the temperature now, and has it changed from that super hot trend we had in January and February? And let's let the data speak to us. In some areas it might surprise us, but let's just be careful about imposing this doom and gloom narrative on the market. Let's let the data tell the story. Okay, I think that there's this one last slide, and then one more thought. I have a poll going on Twitter right now. I'd be tickled if you'd participate, but I'm asking, would you buy a house right now during the pandemic? Please vote and pitch in comments. And I wanted to share this because I think it reminds us that, we don't have a lot of data right now for sales. Okay, that'll come in May and June. somewhat, maybe even April, we'll see more. How are prices really being affected? But we have to remember that the stories of today become the stats of tomorrow. And so what we're experiencing, what buyers are saying, what sellers are thinking, what agents are saying, what appraisers are doing, this is sort of our glimpse into, what the data may be like down the road. So in closing, I would just say, especially if you work in real estate, consider your narrative. And is your narrative right now backed by data? And are you pulling stats? Are you helping to be a resource to your clients and painting a picture of the market that actually exists? I do have on my blog, you can download all these slides. I have some other things that I posted there, but it's right at that link, sacramentoappraisalblog.com/Zoom. And, so check that out. But otherwise, I'm hoping we can maybe dive into conversation and see where this goes and go from there. So there's a lot of talk here. So Sam, I'll just kind of follow your lead and however you want to do this.
Yeah, well, I'm new to managing these Zoom things. So I appreciate all that. Those were great slides. I am going to right now allow people to unmute themselves if I can get there. Give me.
You actually have like a
Sorry, wait. Yeah, just unmuted everybody. Give me 1 second. In the meantime, I had a couple of questions. You mentioned a number of multiple offers. Do you have a way of checking, Ryan, how many multiple offers? Myself, I still am getting multiple offers, but instead of 4 or 5, it's 2. Is there a way of seeing how many multiple offers there are?
And you muted me.
I know there, I unmuted you. Sorry.
Okay, there we go. I was going to use sign language, but
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, if I could. So I pull stats for multiple offers. I haven't done anything too exhaustive yet because we just have pendings right now. We have very little sales that have actually, closed. So we'll have more data soon, but when a market slows, we do see less multiple offers. Even with the information I shared, 53% of sales in March had multiple offers, but 43% of current pendings do. And so that will show up in the data eventually, where we're probably going to have, sales that show that 40-something% had multiple offers. And so I would say less offers. When the market was super hot, I always gauge, the top number of offers, and, there'd be some properties with 30, usually the REOs were priced too low, but, I still log in. I haven't looked at that really over the last about 7 to 10 days, but there's still some properties with 10 or 7, but, I would say that those are, rare. And so kind of for sellers, I would say know the climate of the market. Please don't hold out for 5 offers. If you have one really strong one, it's time to accept, get that buyer on the hook, and then negotiate with the buyer, because the buyer is very much going to want to be negotiating as the escrow ensues. It's not just about the contract price, but yeah, for now, the thing is that the market's always moving. Data can change on a daily basis depending on sentiment and feelings. But yeah, I mean, I concur with that anecdotally though.
Okay, so I have figured out how to let you guys unmute yourselves. So any questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and fire away. This is the whole raising your hand in class sort of
and
thing.
Sam, and we do have a ton of questions in the chat too. We can kind of knock those out, or if people jump in. So let me see here. I will say in East Texas, where we finally have listings above 2% of the search terms. Okay. Yeah, good luck on your charts. Multiple offers may be due to low inventory. Yeah, I mean, but multiple offers, I would say that it's actually declining. Multiple offers are always present, and so it's not a surprise that we're seeing that. I think it's an ever-present thing in real estate. We just have the data to show it now. Until 4 years ago, we didn't have that field in MLS, but I do suspect that will decline. Hey, the right properties, there's strong demand though. Be interested in seeing back on the market listing data. That would be cool. Maybe someday I can pull that, or if you're a genius out here, someone else doing that would be cool.
Something also that I can't find it in here, but I did see in the chat was talking about, lending, like keeping those backup offers actually in a backup position, because we are seeing more things sort of fall out as people's financial situations change. My discussion with a couple of lenders is that, FHA, VA credit score requirements and reserves are probably going to be going up. So, I mean, realtors, it might be very important to really follow up with, hey, how well qualified is this person? Where is their credit score? Asking those more in-depth questions.
Definitely. And I like that, saying direct from the lender, they're waiting 1 to 4 days before close to verify employment. And so, that's an extra layer on the market right now where employment is really being scrutinized. And so, we've had an environment for years where underwriters have been very strict, and I think that this only inflames that issue. There's a lot of issues going around with, the mortgage market, secondary market, and so I'd say very strict underwriting is probably what we can expect unless something, changes that trajectory. But we have to consider too, the different market slivers. If the jumbo market, high-end market could be affected by lack of financing options, with jumbo loans, or if FICO scores change, for FHA buyers or others, that could certainly change the market too. Someone asked about cash out refinances, if they're increasing. I don't have that data, but I'd welcome any loan officer to maybe share something like that. I do know that on cash out refis from an appraisal standpoint that, despite all the talk about appraisers only doing desktop products or doing sort of a hybrid situation where the owner walks through with, an iPhone and such, most lenders are saying, no, we want a full appraisal. And so they're scrutinizing. And again, think about the carnage of the secondary market right now, how important it is to package a loan and to have, a strong basis for, selling that loan with a full appraisal. And so, something to consider. Someone says that the housing market's frozen for multiple months. How will the appraisers and realtors determine value and sales price? And that's the thing, is that we have to consider that we have 2 different sets of data right now, and eventually 3. Okay, we have pre-coronavirus data, or some people call it BC data. It's like so, biblical or Roman or whatever, right? But we have that data, and that's why I'm parsing in some of my graphs March 12th. Okay, or I'm considering March 20th, the lockdown, and because we have to ask, how are all these things affecting? And so we're going to have to really know our market and look and just ask, hey, when did this property get into contract? Because if we're using a sale from the past and say that the market declines, we've got to recognize that, hey, that property got into contract in February before all this started, and it was at a different price point. Okay, and so in some senses, that's really no different than we would do in any market that's changing. But we have to be aware there's BC data, before coronavirus. We have our pandemic data, and then we're going to have our post-pandemic data. And so it's going to be a fascinating ride, but we have to think critically about pending dates and what the market was like, and realize that it's kind of like if there is a pent-up demand eventually when this ends, it could be a little bit like what happens in January. You've had really dull stats, but then the market changes and we see the change in the pendings. What is getting into contract? And that shows that the market is hotter right now, okay? And so we've got to be careful about relying on data, from just 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago that was subdued. Okay, if the market starts to turn, after this is all over, well, then it would be a similar dynamic. Then we're gonna, ride our data down and discover where's the current market today.
Yeah, Marianne asked, would post-pandemic data start on day 1 after the shelter in place is lifted, or do you think there's going to be a lag there? Or?
I think there's a lag. When you look right now at different charts coming out from China, especially, if you guys aren't, today I linked on my blog to a guy, his name's Mike Del Prete. He's putting out phenomenal stuff. Okay, he talks about a lot about big data and iBuyers. Remember those guys? But he's talking a lot about pandemic stuff, and you can see that when there's markets like in China was very flat for a season, and then as the pandemic has ended, you start to see sales volume creeping up again. And so it's been a gradual process in China. Sales volume is nowhere near where it was the year before, but I would expect something, to be seen in our market, because we have this environment that's suppressed right now. Now, this is a real market. It's not artificial. It's what we have. But when I think the bars are off the market and people begin to, resume normal life, and they're no longer, freaking out, and they're making financial decisions, then it only makes sense for sales volume to tick up. I think that I would be really surprised if things got back to normal right away, because life's not going to get back to normal the other day. Sam and I were in a virtual beer chat the other day, and with all the guys, and one guy brought up this idea, what about when we start to go to Kings games, and what's it going to be like? Is everyone going to take your temperature or stuff? And I have family members right now who are saying, man, I don't want to go outside. And so I think that just because the pandemic is over technically, I think it's going to be a gradual process to get back to life. It could be a while before we really feel normal again or get back to normal. And I would expect that if that's the way that people are feeling, that's probably going to influence their behavior too. Okay, I don't know for certain, but it makes logical sense to me that the more normal we feel, the more normal we'll act.
Yeah, and I think a big thing I've been hearing about is lending. So I would encourage any lenders to kind of jump on this, because I do believe that's going to have a great impact on purchasing power, obviously. But like you mentioned before, we already had pretty strict underwriting policies after the last crash. So, I mean, what are you guys seeing in the lending world? Anybody? And you can feel free to unmute yourself, jump in, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Hey, Sam, it's Lonnie.
Hey, Lonnie. Thank
Hey,
you.
well, while Ryan was talking, I was just looking at what our office has done in the past 60 days relative to cash out loans versus other transactions. And for our small little group, it's about 30% has been cash out refis. So that's an uptick for us in a pretty significant way. I mean, there's also a pretty significant, rate and term refinance activity, but cash out refis are definitely up, but I don't expect that to be the norm going forward because of the underwriting policies that are going to tighten over the next, 30 days.
No, thanks. That's good to know. Yeah, something to watch for sure.
Yeah. Anybody else? Looks like a couple people unmuted themselves and had a comment.
Bob McKiernan Realty here. Good morning, Ryan. Good morning, group. We've had a couple of transactions we're closing out right now. We had sort of an early spring for us for volume. And so we're in this closing mode. And the last three we've had have all had very interesting last minute prior to funding conditions changed in terms of gift letters and other, Y-green loans being paid off instead of assumed. And so we're watching those conditions very closely. So I really agree with the group that having those buyers prepared, having everybody's ducks in order is essential, because we need to be very proactive on anticipating what could be happening and allow flexibility.
Well said. And there's one question here. Someone asked, Jay asked, do you have any data on how many properties are being purchased by foreign buyers? I don't. My sense is that our market in Sacramento, at least, isn't dominated by foreign buyers. You have places in California where Chinese buyers have, been, a massive force in Southern California. I don't see that type of dynamic here, anecdotally, but maybe some big data firms would have something. And Marianne said, we got to this, but I want to clarify. She said, would post-pandemic data start on day one after shelter in place is lifted? And I would say definitively yes, but we just may not see, a real definitive change there. There's no sense of where on day one, all of a sudden these 900 listings, that canceled or went on hold are back on the market. I think it'll be gradual. Frankly, some people will step back into the market now. We've got a sense that, who are the market participants? That's one of the big questions to ask right now. Regardless of what prices are doing in any market, we just always ask, who has incentive to buy and sell, rent and invest in today's market? And so I think that we have to identify that there are sellers who are going to list now. They want to try to sort of, beat the market. If they sense that, prices are going to decline, their perception would be, I want to get on before that happens. And so I think we'll definitely see some of that. I've heard of some of that from some agents. And it's a gamble for that seller, obviously, or if that's based on their perception, whether that happens or not.
Yeah. And anecdotally, it seems like, it's not like somebody decides to sell their house and then they're on market tomorrow. We're still seeing a lag from people that were planning on selling their properties anyways. 2-3 months ago, it took them time to get ready for market, and they're just moving ahead. So I'm seeing that myself. I'm selling one of my rental properties that I had planned on selling 4 months ago. It just took a while to get it souped up and ready for market. And here it is. I'm not going to change my plans. And I'm seeing that with a couple other of my clients. They're just moving forward. And so I think that's still moving into the market, that inventory. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in a couple of months when people hadn't already gotten the gears turning on prepping their homes for market. If we see a lag there as well.
Yeah.
Anecdotally.
And probably really important to, have people plan. There are a lot of people on hold right now, and they're getting together their game plan. But most importantly, just to gauge, okay, our list price was at X amount back then, what does it need to be now? Whether it's the same, higher, or lower, that's where we have to listen to the market, where the market's at, rather than listening to the headlines. Someone mentioned that the low income market will be most affected as income drops due to closed employers. And, we'll have to see kind of how our market responds. And I would tend to agree. People with more money can weather a storm. And so that's why you see some of the classic neighborhoods in East Sac and Land Park and such. They definitely declined during the foreclosure crisis, but there wasn't this absolute, gutted sense where things screamed down and, where property values went down. I mean, by, so significantly. Okay. And so I do expect that to be true. Someone was talking about appraisal stuff. A lot of lenders are, like I said, they're touting this idea of, we will entertain a different type of product for appraisers to use, but I think their default is we will still be asking for full interiors, and a lot of colleagues are still out there inspecting. I'm personally not. I don't think that's best, but I give respect to colleagues, and if they think differently, that's okay. But they're being very cautious and prepared, and so I applaud them for that. But I think the market's going to go toward that level. But I have had some calls where people have struggled to find appraisers, and so this is where I think for the loan officers in the room, you need to make sure that you're connected to an appraisal management company, or your own direct lender panel that actually has local appraisers who are working the market. Okay, because I've had a couple calls over the past week where an appraisal management company was fishing for an appraiser in Auburn, and they asked 2 Sacramento guys to appraise it in Auburn. And I don't do a lot of work in Auburn, so I would say no from the get-go. And so their response was, we can't find an appraiser. And I think, well, I don't think you fished long and hard enough. You can't just, catch a fish if you have your pole, in for 5 minutes. And so, and also one of the things that I'm hearing too is, we can't find an appraiser. Appraisers are incredibly busy. Turn times are longer right now, but one of the issues comes down to fees. And they say, hey, our borrower's paying $800. And I always ask the question, well, how much is the appraiser seeing? Because if the appraisal management company is saying, here's $350, and then we're going to, keep $450 here, that's not a very good value proposition to hire someone in a market that's incredibly busy when you're scraping most of it off the top. So when someone says we can't find an appraiser, bounce back that question and say, please let me know what is your advertised fee to the actual appraiser? Because that could be part of the problem. And in a tight market where we need to get appraisers out there very soon and need to get appraisals done, it's just critical that I would say for realtors to be working with loan officers who know their stuff, and hopefully have a panel that is responding well to the local market in terms of being able to take on business. So I hope I didn't ruffle too many feathers there. I think it's so true though.
I think Troy just mentioned, would investors step in to grab some of those lower price point properties, if they do get decimated? I mean, that's what happened in the last downturn, although that happened, I would say, fairly late in the game when prices were at maybe 25% of their peak price. But I'm still seeing investors purchase properties right now, but again, they're just adding to their portfolios slowly.
Absolutely. Even on Twitter today, someone said, in response, would you buy a property right now? He said, yeah, I'd buy a multifamily in a heartbeat. And this guy is someone who owns many properties in Sacramento. And he's still saying, yeah, I would buy. But he's saying, I don't want to touch the single family market. And so it just shows that the market is never always good or always bad. There's always someone willing to buy or sell, and the market's going to be good or bad depending on your ability to afford properties, to buy, sell, rent, invest, all that stuff. And so I think that's it just kind of highlights the whole narrative thing. And sorry to beat the dead horse, but it's just like the market is either good or bad depending on all those factors. And so when we paint the picture of the market that it's always good, that narrative doesn't work then when the stats look kind of bad, so to speak. And so it just reminds us, let's shift to talking about data. So someone said, yeah, still seeing aggressively low appraisal fees and the same thing as normal low fee, fast turn time. And again, yeah, hey, appraiser, here's $350 and we want this back in 5 days. And yeah, definitely go inspect the home during a pandemic. We don't care about you, right? And so not a lot of incentive to say yes.
Hey, Ryan, a couple weeks ago, you mentioned, and I've been using it all through the last couple of weeks, that we're at peak uncertainty. And I think you grabbed that from somebody else, but I'm just going to go ahead and attribute it to you now because I like it. Where are we now in that? I mean, it's like everybody was panicked last couple weeks ago because everything had just changed. To me, it feels like people are maybe settling in a little bit, but where are we at in this?
Yeah. So I got that from Jonathan Miller. I think it's a brilliant phase, peak uncertainty. And I think if anything, the market now, we're all a little bit more used to it because we can see the clear pattern, right? I mean, like my images that I shared earlier, it's hard to argue against that. Yes, pendings are down. Yes, there's less new listings. And so I think that when we get used to stuff, we go, okay, this is our new normal for as long as it lasts. And so I think that, we're all feeling frustrated and, in our homes and, pent up, ready to get out there. But I think, I don't know about you guys, but I'm personally a little bit more used to it. Doesn't mean that I'm content and happy about this, but it starts to feel a little bit different than, 2 to 3 weeks ago. And so, so I think in some senses, yeah, we'll get used to it. And I do wonder, as we're seeing more listings hit the market last week, and it looks like this week we might see more, I kind of wonder if that's a little bit part of it. It could be news of real estate agents being essential. And it could also be maybe some sellers seeing opportunity, all right? But I think that it just shows that the market changes day by day and based on, a lot of sentiment, how are people really feeling? And so, that's why we keep watching day by day. So, but if pendings clearly keep going down, then, it creates a gap between, listings and pendings. And if that gap keeps widening, then that absolutely puts pressure on prices to soften during the pandemic and I mean, maybe after too. And so it's something to watch. One thing to keep in mind, this might sound geeky, but we've seen less new listings hit the market. And so it's easy to think that supply and demand are in balance, but I would say no, there's still more new listings than pendings that are getting into contract. But in the background, we have a lot of listings that have been on the market for a long time. And so I would say that it seems like imbalance overall has grown and as uncertainty ensues. And so it's something to watch in the midst of it all.
Anybody else have any questions, comments? I love hearing from the group. You guys all have interesting perspectives.
So I'll say it looks like Leah is, hey, Leah's on here. So right, your wife?
Oh,
my friend's company just created this tool for homeowners to do the front end work for appraisals. Curious if anyone thinks that's helpful. Yeah, there's a lot of that. I think a lot of data firms are salivating right now going, oh, yes, precious. We're going to get appraisers to, we're going to change the system. And things have been in motion, I think, for a lot of years for that. And I think that they're ready to capitalize. As an appraiser, I want to be the eyes, or I want to direct the video because I don't want people to, be showing me a different house than is actually there. It's this mansion in Granite Bay when it's like, well, that wasn't really the house, all right? Or I don't want someone to walk through with a camera and then to not see the deferred maintenance. When I'm directing the production, I'm going, okay, point it up towards the ceiling, or whoa, wait, stop. What's going on with this? Show me this more. And, but who knows? So we'll see if that's the wave of the future or not.
Yeah, maybe these tech companies are tired of going after this real estate agents. Now they're going to shift their focus on you guys. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, we're the low-hanging fruit. Yeah.
That's right. You mentioned that last week about, those directing it, having homeowners kind of in there doing their own videos and things of that nature. And you were kind of speculating that that might be increasing. Are you seeing that? Or you mentioned earlier there's that underwriters are still requiring a full appraisal. Does a full appraisal require you being in there, or is that coming to fruition?
Well, I think that we're slowly seeing more of that product hit, but again, it won't work. Most lenders I talk to, loan officers saying, yeah, it's for cash out refis, there's no way this is going to happen. And maybe some lenders are thinking differently, but these products are slowly creeping up more. I do hear colleagues talking about that they're using, they have to, in some cases, use the same 1004 appraisal form, but they're actually doing just an exterior only. And so I would say we are seeing more of that slowly but surely. And some of it probably comes down to how bad the pandemic gets, and maybe appraisers, whether they're saying yes and no also. But so I think the takeaway though for any real estate agents here is that when you're working with appraisers for your deals, I would say be extremely on top of communication. And you have to get information into the appraiser's hand. I would say loan officers, reach out to your agents and be very proactive saying, what information do you have? Let's pass it on when the order is given, because if an appraiser's only doing a desktop, let the appraiser know all the information, that you would hopefully be telling the appraiser in person or by email, okay? But the appraiser might not be reaching out to you if the client's like, hey, I just want you to do a desktop on this. I mean, I think maybe the appraiser should still, but I'm just saying your window for communication has really shrunk. If it's helpful, I have an information sheet for appraisers. If you Google cheat sheet for appraisers, Sacramento, it'll come up. Please use that form. Now is a market to be extremely proactive about how you communicate. It's not a hands-off market, especially if you get into contract and then the appraiser doesn't see the property for 10 days. And we just ask, well, what's changed in the market in 10 days? And what if it goes down? Like there's a lot of moving parts here. Clear Capital, they have a product that's free. Now, there's another company doing stuff. A lot of people are coming out with this product. It's like the new rage, oh my gosh, it's changing the industry. I mean, we'll see. Something about a mansion in Rio Linda.
I can maybe speak on that pricing, but I'd be interesting to know, Mary Ann asked, are we seeing a change in pricing strategy with more properties hitting the market? In other words, especially I know here in Sacramento, we knew we'd get multiple offers, so we'd kind of price it a little bit low and then get a bidding war going, and it would rise up. I think people are a little less optimistic about that happening. So, I'll just speak for myself. Our pricing strategy is really zeroing in more on market value. But again, we are still seeing multiple offers. We're just not seeing the 10 multiple offers or 5. We're seeing a couple, and we're really happy to get a couple. So we're not counting on that spread. Before, when it's clear that the market's rising, I think a lot of buyers were just saying, hey, yeah, it's okay. I'll pay a little more because the equity is going to catch up with me in a month, or not a month, a year or so. But now I think I'm seeing buyers less ready to, really put that top bid or really stretch beyond the list price.
I agree.
Statistically, what that gap is, and you can only track so much data, Ryan, but that'd be an interesting number to see, like the percentage over list price. I mean, that one's pretty.
Oh yeah, no, I'll definitely have that I'll start reporting more heavily on sales coming soon. I've been hands off because anything I would report on sales right now, it has to do with the market in February and January. Like that's not helpful to everyone. What will be helpful in a few months, we see the, sales to original list price ratio, and that's going to be super helpful. One thing to consider is for any agents in the room to communicate when you're talking with your sellers, just let them know that buyers have been very finicky over recent years, but what's happening right now can inflame that finickiness, where they're less prone to say, yeah, I want to get into bidding war, or when they look at a property that's clearly too high, there's just less incentive to to make an offer. And so you have to be priced right. But I think we have to realize that buyers have already, before this started, they've already been very picky about price. They've been picky about getting into contract at the right price, and they've been picky about staying in contract. And so put a pandemic on top of that, or sensational articles or ideas that we may be entering a new price cycle, then buyers have incentive to, to cut rope and to not be in contract. And so I would say, not to be dismal, but I would expect for more deals to blow up. And sellers are going to have to work harder to keep it together and to understand where buyers are coming from. And I think one thing that Mike Del Prete said, here I am mentioning him again, that was genius, was that it's not about whether buyers can buy, but will they buy? And so a lot of people have looked at this market and gone, well, it's really sagging because we have a sheltering in place situation. But I would say no, statistically, we started to see the market slough as soon as, March 12th hit, 8 days before our sheltering in place. Like, it's been really, really clear that people are responding to the pandemic. But can it help that now realtors are deemed essential? Maybe so. But a lot of it isn't about ability. I mean, surely some of it is that people not having access to homes, but a lot of it is just about whether people want to be doing that right now. And so that's just something to gauge in coming time, and it's going to be interesting to watch. And then someone said there isn't a shortage of appraisers. There's a shortage of appraisers that won't work for low fees. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some real truth there. Absolutely. From a title industry overview, we're down nationally 60% on the resale front. We're getting requests from verification of employment, sometimes within hours of funding. The job market will be a huge factor in how we position our current strategies. Totally agree. I think the job market, economy, and what's happening with lenders right now, all huge issues. The future hasn't happened yet. We don't know exactly how that's going to show up in our local market, but these are certainly red flags. I totally agree. When you see other markets where sales volume is down substantially, I don't know that we can expect that our market would be any different. And so I think numbers, some people quote 50 to 60%, or maybe even 70% or more, where listings would go down and paintings would go down. And I'm not talking about prices, I'm talking about the volume. Like, I think that's probably what we should expect, unless for some reason our market shows a difference. So, we'll see week by week. Some owners are not allowing access for appraisal inspection. Yeah. I mean, not surprising. So would you want an appraiser in your house right now? So I personally wouldn't.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions? I mean, some other things just anecdotally that I'm seeing are maybe a little bit more concessions happening right now, but sellers being agreeable to those concessions as well. But yeah, like you mentioned, buyers are really ready to cut rope and move on to something else because of just general market uncertainty. I'm not seeing it because of just this huge glut of new inventory to choose from. That's certainly not there. So I think everybody's, I don't know who's on this call, but realtors, have those good conversations with your buyers, make sure they're really in it, make sure you're staying in touch with them and seeing how they're feeling about the market, and make sure you just have those conversations ahead of time before the stress happens. Any consumers that are on here, definitely double check your credit scores, have those really good conversations with your lenders, because things are changing, and nothing's worse than getting into escrow and then being told, like somebody mentioned, verification of employment or just lending practices changing a week before you're set to close. Make sure you're giving yourselves a little buffer there.
Yeah. And Brad asks, anyone know where I can go get a haircut? Just kidding.
Oh my gosh, no, me too. I've got wings over here.
I know. I'm
braids here.
I'm gonna look like either Joe Exotic or the dad from This Is Us pretty soon, whatever that guy's name is. So go back to the 90s, get those long skater bangs or something. I don't know. Hey, I don't know about everyone, but have you noticed just the intense communication lately? I don't know about you. I'm getting so much more communication. I feel like I'm spending probably 5 to 10 hours more each week just answering questions, and some of that's on Zoom calls. But I think that it's another layer in this market where we have all this data, but it's not even just about the data. Anyone who's working in real estate, there's so much more communication. And so I'm just finding, for personally, just to recognize that and then you go, oh, that's why I'm exhausted, and to try to find ways to relax.
Absolutely. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour here, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. If anybody does have any other questions or comments, definitely, you know, this is a friendly group. We won't bite your head off. But we've got one of the best, in my opinion, one of the most knowledgeable people on the call here, Ryan. And I do appreciate that you don't sugarcoat things, but you're also not an alarmist. You're just looking at the hard facts. So I really appreciate you taking the time with us to give us this valuable information.
My pleasure. And thank you, Sam. Thanks, everyone. And guys, if we could close it off, I always like to close with sort of an inspirational idea. I'm a visionary, and I would just say to serve more than you ever have before. And for anyone who's working in real estate, to just step back and realize that it's not just about the escrows, it's about our clients and what are their needs right now. And some people, frankly, are not thinking about real estate. They're thinking about how am I going to put food on the table, or what am I going to do a future job for my future job. And so I think we can just identify and say, what are people going through? What are their needs? And how can we care for them? How can we express care? One thing that I would love to see, I mean, why don't some realtors or loan officers or whoever who want to support local businesses, why not go put, you know, $100 tab at a brewery and say, you can go pick up a beer on my behalf, you know, but the only deal is you have to buy an appetizer. Like, that supports the business, or, you know, something. I just feel like there's so much room to think out of the box with how we can support local businesses, how we can support people, and, you know, just being those types of people that text message others and say, hey, how are you holding up? Okay, I'm going to have a virtual meeting with a friend today at 5 p.m. I texted him over the weekend. He came to my mind, and so I texted him, and then we set up a Zoom call just to chat, just to check in. And so I feel like that's a rarity. We're all freaking out with, you know, all these news stories and such, but we need to be centered and just realize, like, let's keep it about relationship, because that's what really, really matters. That's what people will walk away with. They will remember in this market, not our brilliant stats. They will remember how much did you really care. And so I'd say let's take that torch and, you know, light it up and be more generous and caring than ever.
Well said, Ryan. And I feel like that beer tab thing was directed at me. Don't worry, I got you. Anyways, well, if that's it, thank you again, Ryan. Thank you, everybody, for being on the call. I hope this is valuable information. We did record this, so I think Ryan will probably have a link on his blog in the next couple of days if you want to send this to anybody. Grounded will have this on our Facebook page probably in the next couple of days as well. So thank you, everybody. Have a great week. Be safe out there, and hopefully we'll be doing this again soon. So stay tuned.
Thanks, everyone.
Right.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sam.